Okay, so this is one of the Task 1 essays. So we're going to be looking at a table which shows the number of imprisoned people in 5 countries between 1930 and 1980. So the first thing you should always check when you look at a Task 1 is what are the dates, okay? So are you talking the present tense, past tense, or future tense? So in this case, we're going from 1930 to 1980, so you should always make sure all your grammar, you're talking in the past, okay? This didn't happen in the present, it's not going to happen in the future. Make sure all the description, all the information you're giving is going to be in the past tense. So this essay starts with, so the first thing he's doing is he's trying to paraphrase the title. The bar chart illustrates the number of people. So it should be the bar chart. There's one bar chart, so it needs to be singular. The bar chart illustrates the number of people in jail in 5 countries between 1930 and 1980. So my main issue with this is that he's not really paraphrased. The only thing that this person has really paraphrased from the title is the number of people in jail instead of the figures for imprisonment. So he's got one paraphrase here, but he's kept this the same. This wasn't paraphrased. He's got 5 countries and then between 1930 and 1980. So to improve, they really need to paraphrase more from the title. So you could even put in, if you wanted to say 5 different countries, 5 different nations would be okay, something like that. Anything to sort of change it up slightly. And then also here, between 1930 and 1980 can be paraphrased too. So it could be even from 1930 to 1980, or you could say across how many years? 50 years, or in a 50-year period, you could say. So one very useful thing to do for a Task 1 essay is to think about all the different ways you can paraphrase years and give information about years, okay? So that would be much more helpful because that shows me that this student has a better vocabulary, and so that's how you improve your vocabulary score, by showing that you can correctly paraphrase and show that you can change the words in the title. So that would be my first issue that I would have with this answer. Okay, so then he goes on to the overview. So overall, so first we've got a capital letter, it should be the number of imprisonments at 1980, the number of imprisoned people, imprisoned people in Canada in 1980. Okay. So again, you say we're talking about the past tense, people who were imprisoned. The number of imprisoned people in Canada in 1918, New Zealand, Australia. The number of imprisoned people in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, sorry, I should put that in 1980 here, has been decreased. So it should be, again, so we haven't come up with our tense issues. So they're not quite using the correct tense for talking about the past. Australia has decreased. Has decreased, so it should be between in Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, 1980 has decreased since 1930. Okay, so you can tell when I was reading that, I was trying to rephrase it correctly, and because the grammar that the original person wrote was confusing, even as a native speaker, I'm having to go back and double check what the structure of the sentence is. So that's a bad sign that the grammar isn't completely correct. So then we want to say, in the other hand, you should know, on the other hand, in 1980, the United States and Great Britain's populations, so we've got 2 United States and Great Britain, so it should be plural, populations in jail. So this is kind of an awkward phrase, so I would actually move that here and say the jailed population has been increased compared to 1930. So again, we've got the same issue of the correct tense, has increased compared to 1913, or we would just say increased compared to 1930, because we're just talking about the past. We don't need to make it too complicated, so it's okay just to use past simple to talk about it. Okay, so then he moves on to giving the more detailed points in the beginning. So I like this. So he's good for coherence. He's using his linking word in the beginning. Great Britain steadily increase, do it past tense, steadily increased since 1930, and it reaches, past tense again, reached almost 80,000 and in 1980. So these are the kind of easy mistakes that you can check to make when you're talking about years. It should be in 1980. My main issue with this sentence, in the beginning, Great Britain steadily increased. What? What increased? Okay, so what's the topic? You need to be talking about the population of prisoners or imprisoned people. So otherwise, the meaning is Great Britain steadily increased. So this meaning is the actual country got bigger and bigger, which obviously is impossible. So you need to tell me what increased. So Great Britain steadily increased their incarcerated population. Okay, incarcerated population, that's a paraphrase for imprisoned people. Okay, so incarcerated, if you paraphrased and use something like that, that's how you improve your vocabulary score. Okay, next sentence. However, the United States. United States' prison population. Okay, so again, prison population, we don't need demonstrate, fluctuated over the 5 decades. Okay, so the United States demonstrates fluctuated number of imprisonments is a very sort of vague way of talking about it. You want to be very clear in task 1. It's better to be clear and direct and simple than try and be confusing. However, the United States' prison population fluctuated over the 5 decades. Okay, that would be a much clearer and easy to understand part of your overview. It finally ends up at 140,000. Okay, so I do like how we've got a sort of nice linking word there, so I did like that. So then we move on to the next part of the detail. In Canada, that number kept going down. Okay, this is too vague. That number, what number? Okay, this is where you do more paraphrasing. Okay, can you increase your vocabulary to talk more about imprisoned people, prison population, incarcerated people, imprisoned felons, okay, whatever vocabulary you can use. In Canada, that number kept going down. So going down is too informal to use in your writing. That's something you would use when you were speaking. So you need to think about how you could change that to be more formal. So we could say decreasing, we could say dropping, we could say falling, but going down usually, falling. So usually if it's a 2-word phrase or 2-word sex, it's too informal. And so the formal is usually just 1 word to use. Except in 1950 and 1980, finally ends up at 90,000 people in jail. So in Canada, the number of prisoners kept dropping, except in 1950 and 1980, finally ends up. So again, I have this question here. What, okay? What finally ends up at 90,000 until the number finally ends up at 90,000 people in jail? Australia starts, so again, issue with tense, started at 70,000 and it has been up and down. So again, we've got the same issue here as the going down. It's too informal and this person needs to think about what's a more formal way to express this. Okay, so the one most people probably use would be fluctuated, which is the formal way of saying up and down, until what? Until it reaches 45,000 people again in 1980. New Zealand's number dramatically decreased, so this was good, dramatically decreased, that's correct, between 1930 and 1940, but after that the number kept growing until it meets. So again, present tense, this should be past tense until it met. But again, to be honest, that's not really the correct meaning. Kept growing until it reached would probably be a more formal way to say it. You don't really meet a number, so meet in this sense doesn't really make sense. So it was the wrong tense and it was also kind of the incorrect word. So overall, I think my main issue with this answer is that the coherence and cohesion of the task achievement, I would give it probably a 5. So they do make an attempt and they do give me basic information. But to be honest, a lot of the grammar and the vocabulary was quite poor for me. And I think they didn't use a great enough variety. They didn't use a lot of paraphrasing for prisoners or imprisoned people. Some of the vocabulary was too informal. And then the same for the coherence and cohesion. There was no comparison between them, really. I wanted to see more comparison between the different trends or correlation between the different countries, but they didn't take the chance to really use any comparison words in their answer. So overall, I would have given this 4.5 overall. And to improve, really, I would suggest for this student in particular, they need to work on the vocabulary, and then they need to work on their basic grammar. So all those times where they made mistakes, talking about the year, or from this year to this year, or this happened in 1980, that really stood out to me as a mistake that can be corrected. So that's what I would always recommend to this student really to work on for next time.